On this slide and the next slide, we have a table, and you'll see one similar to this in the next few slides and in your homework. So let's make sure you understand the table. The table summarizes results of 170 people's preferences for soda. Notice that the 170 is over here in the far right corner, and that's always where the total of all the totals will be. But you've also got the total of the men, the total of the women, the total of the cola, the total of the root beer, and the total of the Sprite. And so when you're asked to find probabilities, make sure that your eyes go to the totals of each column and row. If one person is randomly selected from the above table, find the following probabilities. For instance, the probability of a man. This is just one category, so it's a simple probability, 83 men out of 170 total. If they ask for a decimal, which they usually will, you can type that into your calculator as a division problem. That's all a fraction is, 83 divided by 170, and we round it almost always to 3 decimals, so 0.488, since there's a 2 next to it. Same thing for cola. It just has one category, so who likes cola? 77 people out of 170. When you type that in and divide it, you get 0.453. In part C, we have an or. This is what you've been studying in the last few slides. The probability that someone likes Sprite or cola. Hopefully you're remembering now that every time you see the word or, you're always going to add. So, how many people chose Sprite in this survey? 48. 48 out of 170. Plus, how many people chose cola? 77. 77 out of 170. And then you need to ask yourself a question. Are there any people that voted in both categories? And we would know that because they would be an and, or you could call it an overlap. Visually in this chart, we can see that nobody who voted for cola also voted for Sprite. So if there's nobody in both categories, we just add. Remember, when you're adding fractions, you're really just adding the numerators. So 48 plus 77 gives us 125 out of 170. So we can divide by 170 to give us 0.735. Let's keep going. Next slide, same chart. If one person is randomly selected from the above table, find the following probabilities. A man who likes root beer. Notice it doesn't say or. We're not adding. It's just two categories that overlap. So here are the men, here are the root beer. We can see that 25 of those overlapped out of 170. So don't make it more complicated if it's two categories, but there's no or and. Just look for where they overlap. And if we divide that, we'd get 0.147. But then notice in part E, we do have the word or. So we know we're going to add all the men. I'm going to erase my chart here. It might help to write your chart in your notes, or you can even print it out on your homework. So all the men would be a total of 83 out of 170 plus all the cola, 77 out of 170. Then you're going to ask yourself that question. Are there anybody in both categories? An and, an overlap? And again, the table makes it really obvious. 40 is in both categories. It overlapped. So what do? We subtract the 40. We're not leaving it out. We're just making sure it's not getting counted twice. So in our calculator, we can use the numerators. 83 plus 77 minus 40 gives us 120 over 170. So we divide and round that to 0.706.